session, we have to continue with our next speaker. But we'll stay in the cosmos theme with Paniel Reyes Cardenas, who comes from the University of Sheffield. And he will be talking about Peice's evolutionary cosmology and the need to avoid circularity in metaphysics.
Okay, I'll try. There's one claim lurking here. The title of the talk is Peice's Evolutionary Cosmology, and there's a subline to it, is on the necessity to overcome circularity in metaphysics. I'll explain what do I mean with that. The outline of the talk will be this. Is that the outline? Yeah. So there's one claim I'm interested in to sort of, have a special remark in one claim, and is that evolution is much more than anything else a device to understand a rational reconstruction of something. So in a way, I'm just trying to approach the concept of evolution as an epistemological device. Having said that, I'll just carry on with the outline of the talk, which is, hopefully, I'll make it on time. I have even a chronometer here, just to stick myself to time. And if not, you just can throw me some water or poke me or whatever. So yes, so four points, basically. I'm just going to say who is Charles Peirce, because I suppose you're not probably that familiar with him. He's a philosopher, but he was a polymath as well, so he did a lot of stuff in the 19th century. Amongst other things, he invented pragmatism. I'll say a bit about that. Then I'm just going to drift into cosmology from an evolutionary point of view, just trying to say what do we understand by that. And hopefully, the previous talk, which was amazing, it'll be a nice introduction to that, so I won't care too much in giving details. Thirdly, I'll say what do we understand as patterns and evolution mathematics from this point of view. It's just, but bear in mind this. I'm approaching this from the point of view of epistemology, trying to understand evolution as a concept in the context of inquiry. And finally, I'll say something about metaphysics, circularity, and evolutionary cosmology, trying to explain why an evolutionary point of view is needed to avoid some kind of circularity in metaphysics, especially what is known as a priori metaphysics or a priori metaphysics. Having said that, I'll just carry on then. So Charles Sanders Peirce, a philosopher of the 19th century, is well known as founder of pragmatism. And pragmatism is a method of inquiry. Peirce believed that the benefits of his methods rely in the achievement of self-controlled inquiry. Peirce spent his lifetime trying to achieve what he called scientific metaphysics, opposed to ontological metaphysics. Further ahead, I will explain what do I mean by that, and why do we have to somehow avoid ontological metaphysics. Scientific metaphysics is realism about patterns, universals, and laws. And scientific metaphysics is opposed to a priori metaphysics for reasons I'll explain further ahead later on. And Peirce finished his project of scientific metaphysics with his theory of evolutionary cosmology. Hope that will make sense at some point. Don't be worried, we'll get there. 3 minutes so far, so I think I'm sticking to the time. So, yeah, cosmology from an evolutionary point of view. What is that? So, cosmology is a metaphysical story of nature. Physics is a cosmology as long as reckons a description of what physically there is in a rational manner. So it's a rational reconstruction of how things come apart in the history of the universe, and trying to reconstruct that story. We have like the standard model of physics, something that can be lined up with a lot of other theories about emergence. So that's fairly uncontroversial, but so far so good. However, in the history of philosophy, many have tried to devise metaphysics by thinking, firstly and foremost, from an a priori point of view, which is, it means that they try to explain that we need to overcome the risk of any skepticism by devising metaphysics based on synthetic a priori judgments, and that's Kant, basically. And why is that? Because there is this suspicion that as long as you cannot have absolute certainty about what you know, then all that you know is the conditions of your knowledge. And then from there, you have to unleash all the conditions of knowledge in general. And therefore, metaphysics is not possible in a traditional sense. You have to devise it after some kind of internal logic of our conditions of knowledge. I will reject that claim in Peirce's basis, but I'll say later on why. Peirce meant to have an evolutionary approach to cosmology. He coined the two doctrines to explain this movement. This could sound a little bit eccentric, but I'm trying to avoid getting into details with this, but as you know, the devil is there. So, two theories. Theikism, it is a doctrine about the fact that the universe started off with entropy and chance. And Synechism. Synechism is the doctrine that picks on the fact that out of chance and randomness, patterns might emerge and create law-like behavior in the universe. So there is I'm just going to pick up in the example, one of the examples in the morning session about the Brownian movement. So you see some patterns emerging out of apparent chaos or apparent randomness or apparent chance. And these kind of patterns that line up are not necessary in the universe. They don't seem to be necessary. Think about crystallization. If the right conditions are given, just a bunch of molecules, a bundle of molecules of water, they can just evolve into beautiful crystals. But some conditions might be necessary for that to happen. So that kind of thinking is about Synechism. It's some kind of theory about the continuity and the rationality and thinking in terms of patterns, but only if and only if there are the necessary conditions for that to happen. Okay, I'm just going to carry on, and probably that will be slightly more clear at the end. So patterns evolution and mathematics are somehow related. Why? Because mathematics explains the parts of those patterns, the gradualization of those patterns. I'll explain what I mean later on. What I'm trying to say is that Peirce devised as some idea of a kind of mathematics that emphasizes not in that discrete objects, but in series and structures in general, which is something akin to what is contemporary mathematical structuralism, which is actually what I do, theories of foundations of mathematics, but that's a different story. Patterns belong to the category of, okay, I'll try to explain very briefly what are Peirce's categories. They are not very, they don't have a, can you hear me? Yeah. They don't have very appealing, oh yeah, probably should be a little bit farther away. It's just need to, my glasses, I probably will have to get some new glasses because I can't see very well. Sorry, digression. So 3 categories on Peirce's categories in Peirce's metaphysical story: firstness, secondness, and thirdness. Not very appealing titles for categories, but it's something fairly simple. Firstness is possibility, which in philosophy is also, or logics is known as model structures. Secondness is facts, like resistance, whatever opposes to my phenomenological qualities. And thirdness is regularity or law-like behaviors. Okay, patterns belong to the category of thirdness. They are coherent patterns of regularities with some kind of vagueness involved. Evolutionary patterns are patterns of continuity. And continua are series in which there is a general share by existing members that share something up and above them in terms of a real general. I'm just going to try to put forward a very simple example. Think about sinus paradox. Are you familiar with that? You know, if the turtle and a Calouste? Well, okay. So let's imagine there is a barrel distance between myself and the audience, okay? So if I want to reach you, I'm going to have to go along the distance. And but if distance is if the concept of distance, the concept of a distance between 2 points, is based in the idea of that a set or a bunch of that discrete points, these points are virtually divisible to infinite. So that poses a problem, because if that is the case, if everything is composed of building blocks, like atoms in that sense, atoms not in the sense of distance, atoms of distance, then it's impossible for me to reach you, because I have to go around an infinite number of points, and that's impossible. So in a way, what I'm trying to say is that the concept of distance is a concept that needs vagueness and generality. You see what I mean now? What I'm trying to say is that if I understand distance as a set, I get myself into trouble. If I understand the concept of evolution is in a series as an aggregate of different individuals, I'm going to struggle exactly to say where something started and when it finished. Who was the first man or the first woman? We don't have to ask that kind of questions, because we don't need to conceive evolution as a series of discrete individuals adding up a concept. It's actually the other way around. Evolution is a rational theory that takes for granted vagueness, and then we apply it, and then we spot individuals, say, oh yes, this belongs to this group, but taking for granted there is some vagueness going on there. Okay. Actually, I'm close to the end. Patterns. So, considered in this way, patterns can be explained as a mathematical story, but not necessarily in the sense of concrete mathematical functions, but concrete mathematical structures that are vague and general. Evolution is the pace from chance to order, coming back to the cosmology, from taicism to synecism in a law-like tendency to habit or continuum behavior. Mathematics interprets these patterns as true continua, opposed to series of discrete objects. Example of a continuum are the natural number series considered as a structure in itself, opposed to aggregates. Let's take the natural number series. Some people think that we are caught in a problem when we ask about the existence of numbers, because they say, is there such thing as the tree? 4, 5, the number in itself, does have any kind of existence? And the people who accept that kind of thing, prominent mathematicians have accepted such ways of thinking, is called Platonism. But accepting that mathematical structures are real doesn't necessarily entail that we accept that the concrete points in the structure are real in the same sense, and therefore they're not necessarily existent. However, there is a recalcitrant point of view that seems to pop up every now and again. So consider we're different people, we never met before, and we all are presented with a natural number series. Interestingly enough, if we inquire fair enough and long enough, we're all going to come across that the prime numbers, for example, are the same. And if not, well, somebody's got to have a kind of mistake at some point in this process. You see what I mean now? There is an emergent pattern, a recalcitrant sort of resistance of experience. And that's what I mean by discontinua. Universals, as conceived in this way, are real in this sense. They express the vague continuity that is conceptually prior to things and instantiates the pattern. The patterns is a structure prior to the individuals that instantiate it. Only universals render scientific knowledge as possible. Why? Because commonness is a pattern. If I want to distinguish between two things, I need to find criteria to compare things on criteria, or at least one criterion of resemblance between things is based in a vague concept that is shared by both things. So in a way, there's a conceptual necessity of conceiving universal vague concepts if we want to reconstruct a rational story of what we believe. So that's why Synegism is a theory of continuity expressible in mathematical continua, series of increasing patterns describable as metaphysical prior to discrete objects. Okay, that's the way that the argument goes forward. And how am I go? Yeah, 4 minutes. I'm going to get there, hopefully. So I said before that there is a problem with a priori metaphysics. Why? Let's see why. I'm just going to quote my supervisor there just to, save some time. A priori metaphysics is the way devised by Kant and leads to some kind of circularity. This is from the point of view of epistemology. Don't be worried about the actual rational reconstruction of our sciences. This is actually normative to all sciences, in the sense that it's going to have consequences to any inquiry. It's just exploring our epistemological setup. Oh, sorry. So if we make use of results obtained through logical, monitor, empirical, or metaphysical inquiry, then we risk incorrigible error. We might use an incorrect empirical theory, which leads us to adopt mistaken procedures of inquiry, which in turn confer our acceptance of that empirical theory. So if we believe that our conditions to knowledge are normative to any knowledge, regardless of experience, then the risk we have is that we're going to take for granted those principles at all times. So we're just gonna end up begging the principles we already accepted. So that circularity is dangerous from an epistemological point of view. And if we're going to do metaphysics in such a way, we are caught up in some problems, and we cannot push forward inquiry, especially if we want to sort of accept experience. So metaphysics controlled with recalcitrant experience avoids circularity. It pushes the way of inquiry forward. However, there is a fallibilism going on here. As it were, we're walking in a box. You see what I mean? And we can slip down anywhere. So our knowledge is provisional. The important thing is pushing inquiry forward always. We have no absolute certainty about what we know. What we have is a relentless process of inquiry. And from the pragmatism point of view, from this tradition that Peice started off, called pragmatism, we're better off if we accept some metaphysical patterns that emerge in nature. Because it's a way of not putting a halt into the inquiry. You see what I mean? So however metaphysical responses to explanatory questions must reflect recalcitrant aspects of inquiry, they do not need to be carried out before logic can be completed. Evolutionary answers to questions about reality are modes of things of things. So metaphysics in general is reconstructed out of our recalcitrant experience and our process of inquiry. But we want the process of inquiry to be self-controlled. And if we want so, we need to devise, a way of conceiving things that can be self-explanatory and goal-directed. And I call that process, that relentless process, inquiry. So just to sort of summarize the argument, it goes like this. There are different ways of making metaphysics in an a priori manner or attending to scientific inquiry. A priori metaphysics falls in circularity for the reasons I said before. Scientific metaphysics is a way of not blocking the way of inquiry, And evolutionary cosmology is a result of an explanatory need, expressing the answer to ever-growing questions about reality, confronted with experience, especially when it comes down to universal concepts. And that's why evolution, more than a particular theory to biological systems or whatever else, is a metaphysic, sorry, a rational device we use to reconstruct rationally explanation of things and try to give causes to things without getting caught into circularity. Thank you very much indeed.